Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Hector Cisneros from Lima, Peru, on behalf of the National Agrarian University and specifically for Professor Jorge Chavez, who couldn't be here with us tonight. Um, it's my pleasure to present to you Dr. Gamini Kushpa Kumara for this presentation. He's going to talk about prospects and challenges for forestry and forestry education in Sri Lanka. Professor Pushka Pumara is an agricultural agroforestry scientist with over 34 years of experience, a senior professor in crop science, director of Postgraduate Institute of Agriculture, and former dean of the Faculty of Agriculture. He's also an elected fellow of the National Academy of Science in Sri Lanka. He holds a master's degree in forestry and its relation to land use and a PhD in forest genetics and germplasm conservation from the University of Oxford. His research covers systems approach to agriculture, forest genetics, and tree domestication and agrobiodiversity, among other topics. He has over 120 peer-review publications and 25 books or book chapters. And to address these issues, he will talk about forestry education and the way it must evolve by incorporating modern technology, sustainability principles, and hands-on skill so that Sri Lanka forestry sector can contribute significantly to both environmental protection and socio-economic development. Welcome, Professor Gamini Pushpa Kumara. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction and thank you very much for inviting. I hope that you can hear me as well as you can see the screen.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, we
good.
can book her.
Yeah, good. Very good morning and very good afternoon and evening to all of you. So we are uniting through Zoom through this presentation process. And thank you for the APFECM as well as the University of British Columbia for organizing this series. Let me to give some overview about these challenges and also how we can actually address some of these challenges through the forest education in Sri Lanka. And specifically, I would like to talk about this with respect to the research background that we currently having with our teams. And then I will move forward actually to some of the challenges and how actually that challenges are so critical probably for Sri Lanka and some of the island nations, as well as some of the South and Southeast Asian countries. And then thinking about the more utilization part, I'm trying to explore actually a new way of thinking in forestry and forest education, especially with respect to the context of Sri Lanka as well as some of the other countries. So let me to start with this. And so my research career start actually with the reproductive biology research on tropical forest plant, especially with respect to jack. And we found that actually it is a completely different species than what the literature shows us. And it is a kind of a outcrossing species. And that is how I started research career. And then I contribute actually to the tropical plant reproductive biology research, especially with respect to several species and including this dragon fruit. And then, of course, with respect to cinnamon, because we have large number of different cinnamon species and reproductive biology is quite important. It is not only the traditional way of looking the reproductive biology using morphology, but it's going beyond and finding the solution for this through the modern technology as well. And looking about that, so we gone deep into that, how pollinators and others support the forest ecosystem as well as the species in cultivation in Sri Lankan context, especially with respect to the cinnamon of Sri Lanka. And then we have a strong research team with us, especially on the pteridophyte research under the forest environmental condition. And under that situation, so we develop the distributional aspect of ferns in Sri Lankan context. And also we have described new species, so which is the photograph shows, and this is uh, Cyathea, which is a kind of a tree fern. We are having several species of Cyathea, and when we doing the research in one of the tropical rainforests, we found this species, and we name it as Cyathea or Elisopila srilankensis. That is the current name actually. And when we observing about the close relatives to this particular species when defining the species, and we found that it is not linked to India, it is not linked to Southeast Asia, but it is linked to Madagascar as well as in the Tanzania. And the close relatives are there actually when we observing the herbarium samples, and also, so that probably explain about the Gondwana land and the Sri Lankan link with respect to that particular aspect. So we have this new species described, and this is actually the publication of that which has been given, which has been published in American Fern Journal. And then when we looking this through a PhD student, we found that we have Hookery Cyathea Hookery as well as Cyathea sinuata. And then when these two are there, then we have Cyathea sledgy. And that sledgy is something we thought as a hybrid. And this has also been defined in scientific arena in the Fern Gazette. And so it is kind of a new finding to Sri Lankan context. And we have not stopped actually all this at that stage, and we gone beyond that level, and we have trying to identify some conservation approach for this probably a living fossil in the country, and with respect to this particular research group. And we define the conservation priorities also for this category of plants. And during our exploration, we were able to actually rediscover some of these extinct, supposed to be extinct species from the natural forest in the country. And again, we recently identified this particular species growing in along the streamlines in the natural forest areas of the country, and that also come into the scientific publication. And our research also focus on actually the national red listing process, and we contributed through this pteridophyte in Sri Lankan context, and we helped the red listing people to identify the supposed to be red listing species of the pteridophyte, and that contribution also there. If you take about the Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka is quite unique and with respect to diversity, and one of such unique species is cinnamomum species, and we have about 9 cinnamomum species in Sri Lanka, of which one of the beauties that out of these 9 species, 8 species are endemic to Sri Lanka, and this Cinnamomum silanicum, earlier we called Cinnamomum verum. Verum is available even in India, but Cinnamomum silanicum is a true cinnamon, which is having a very good potential for agriculture in Sri Lankan context, and therefore we looking about this utilization of the forest and forest genetic resources. And if you look about this particular species, so we have defined actually the species, and it's trying to solve its complication with the different species, especially with respect to arum. So it came very recently actually in the +1. And also we're trying to provide actually this genetic resources for the global scenario with which is the breeding purpose, and we have identified the unique gene full of this genetic resources. so which probably is supposed to be one of the safest cinnamon species in the world, so that we want to make sure that this species is in the different level in the futures to come. And also we have discriminate actually their levels, and its uses in addition to the human contribution and its uses with respect to the poultry and all other feeds, because the use of cinnamon is a kind of not only a spice, but currently it is its demand is expanding because its uses going beyond actually the human use, and it's kind of a nutraceutical and kind of medicinal qualities trying to explore into various directions. And we have published this in the Springer as well as some other some other publishers. And then the third aspect what we looking in Sri Lankan context is that contribution of our research to climate change, and we trying to work with the especially with respect to agroforestry and how it help actually to mitigate and not to mitigate, adapt into the climate change actions. And we have published, actually, we have a team working on this particular aspect. And also we have contributed to ethnobotany as well as some of the utilization of this forest genetic resources in various places. And in addition, actually, I'm trying to network with the global scientists, and we have contributed to this tropical and subtropical Asia value tree species under threat. And that is a publication of a collective group led by this Hans, and which has been published, and it explained about how and which way that we can support the forestry in terms of the forest genetics. And then some of the aspect which I'm trying to bring into the action for the forestry education is that the system thinking, because one of the critical issue of our country is that we are in a place where forests are scattered with the human settlement, and most of the things are scattered in different places rather than having blocks. So therefore, unless we understand actually landscape and the system, it's going to be very difficult. And therefore, we trying to bring this into the action through, we have a system called tank village system, so which is dominated in the dry zone area. And so we trying to understand and give a perspective about why the system is important when we are defining education or any other aspect. And then we have actually quite a bit contribution to the agroforestry. And when I support actually work with the World Agroforestry Center, and after that period, and we develop a team to look into this particular aspect, especially with respect to how this agroforestry system supporting to the carbon storage and the biomass, and also in different environmental situation and different agroecology, and also in different systems, and how actually this help ex situ or some kind of a circa situ conservation of trees and tree genetic resources in agricultural setup, because as I mentioned, agriculture is embedded in kind of a forestry environment in the country. So we have actually analyzed the whether this kind of a system can support the food security and nutrient security, and then the how actually that it work with respect to the socio-ecological production landscape, and also how does it support actually food security and the livelihood security. And we have quite a bit of contribution to these not only the national perspective but international perspectives, and putting all these supportive information. And recently we have trying to see actually that how this the trees and this kind of a setup help us to restore the some of the degraded environment, especially with respect to the catchment areas of the country. And one of the way that when we look about the human domination as well as the natural requirement, and we cannot actually go back to original forest stated as early as possible, and it has been taken a lot of time to convert that. But we seen that actually when land tenure issues supported, especially through the ownership of the land, it is much easy for the those owner to convert this degraded land into some kind of a productive land, which probably mimic a kind of a natural system. So that's actually home garden, and which probably resilient to a climate, the climate change as well as. So we have gone detail into the development of this climate resilience index for the this home garden and the agroforestry systems. And this information has come to some kind of a climax situation because of this publication actually, which published in last year. And we did assess tree cover of the country, and also parallel to the forest cover of the country, and that revealed, so this left side, so it is the natural forest cover of the country. So you can see that the natural forest cover is limited to small patches, and all these patches, this is the dry zone area, which I will show a little later. And this is actually the wet zone part and the origin of the most of the rivers of the country. You can see that the natural forest cover of this wetter part of the country is very limited, and is very limited and scattered through human-dominated landscape. In contrast, the tree cover and tree cover density, you can see the thick tree cover density parallel to the natural forest, but the area somewhere here is also quite green. That is largely because of the trees outside forest and largely agroforest, and probably contributing to different plantations which are having a systems of agroforestry or similar kind of systems. Now, one example I can give, and this is the Colombo, which is the capital city of the country, and where the forest cover is just 0.1. But you can see that even in Colombo, the tree cover is quite substantial. And then if you take about Gampaha, which is again highly populated district in the country, and that also having quite substantial level of tree cover. And if you take about Jaffna, Jaffna also having less tree cover, but again, there is some kind of a tree cover available in Jaffna Peninsula as well. So this has taken actually a kind of a different perspectives, how to look about this forestry, and how to look about this forest and forest education in the country, in parallel to the bringing this issue into the action. So why actually we have this kind of tree and tree cover in the country? That is because this home garden system, so which is mimicking actually, which is mimicking the natural forest, but it is a productive landscape. And why it is important? Because it is scattered, the forest cover is scattered only in some part of the country, but this agroforest is, although owned by individual people for a small area, but united by the land use pattern, and that bring actually kind of a land use continuity to the country. And in addition, we have different kind of agroforestry system. Some are tea based, some are tea and rubber based, and some are coconut based. And I'm showing actually only limited one. And these bring some kind of a good the tree cover to the country. What I want to point it out is that yes, forest cover is quite important, and we have reserved forest in Sri Lanka, and we don't have actually use forest except in a few places, and which is minimum amount 23. We don't want to disturb that further. Somehow country is surviving because of the trees outside forest. So that is actually some of the important aspect as far as Sri Lanka is concerned. So given that condition, that 23% of tree cover and the forest cover is distributed within this 65,000 the square the area of the country, and we have the tropical wet evergreen forest dominated in this part of the country, And we have tropical montane forests in the central highlands. And then we have dry deciduous forests in some of these dry zone areas of the country. And then we have savanna, and we have montane, submontane forests, and then we have some different kind of a forest based on the, though that the country is quite small, and we have the huge diversity of the natural forest in the country. And if you see about this distribution pattern, and this is what it explained, and it has been largely in the dry area. So this 29.7% comes largely from the dry monsoon forest, which are these areas of the country. And in contrast, what is more critical in this part of the country, so we have very minimum, so which is actually quite very low level of forest cover in the country. So that is something that we need to think very carefully. And if you look about the country, though that it is small, diversity wise, it is quite unique actually. So I'm presenting this information with respect to the having some of the subclass categories. Now, if you take one or two example, if you take this Magnolidae subclass, number of orders in the world is 8, number of orders in Sri Lanka is also 8. And if you take number of families, and now 38 out of 38 families in the world, so we have 18 plant families in the country. And quite similarly, other categories also quite same. And out of 377 families, so we have 189 representation, which is almost 50%. So therefore, a lot of people consider that Sri Lanka is a kind of a unique country within this world, though that it is a small, tiny island of the. And another important aspect of the country is that this natural diversity is highly endemic to the country, and especially with respect to this wet zone area, so which is scattered and very much limited, but the endemism is quite substantial in that area. So the with respect to flowering plants, these are the example that so we usually highlighted. And with respect to this category, the diversity and endemism is quite substantial, though that the country is quite small. That is not only in the trees, but also shrubs and herbs in the natural vegetation. And there are a lot of people actually doing this kind of works, and in Sri Lankan context, and those endemism has been well published in the country. And if you take about flowering plants categories, and it is about 28.3% are somewhat the endemic to the country. Now, two examples is that these endemism not only available in the natural vegetations, which is protected, conserved, but in outside natural vegetation. I think that is something that we need to concern. And these two species, one is that Stemenoporus moni, which is a family of the belongs to the family of the Dipterocarpaceae, as well as this Meshua plant is available in the private land, so that it is somewhat vulnerable to actually loss from that, because land is owned by the different category and different people, and then if they don't want, so they can easily destroy this kind of a species. There are several species belongs to this kind of a situations in uh, and not only in the plants, but with respect to animal also within Asian context. The diversity is quite substantial actually in the birds, reptiles, land snakes, and dragonflies, amphibians, and freshwater fish, etc. And we have beautiful the herds of elephants, as well as some of the wild species. And this is actually jungle fowl, and which is the national bird of the country. And although this jungle fowl is coming from the same family like poultry, so the chicken, but there is no relation with actually in the no relation with the use of genetic pool, that these jungle fowl are quite resistant to much of the environmental condition and distributed right throughout the country despite different forests. So the diversity is there actually with respect to plants and animal. However, it is categorized as one of the global biodiversity hotspot, and Western Ghats, along with the Sri Lanka, is considered as one of the global biodiversity hotspot, which means, and we are in kind of a pathetic situation. We have a high level of diversity and very high level of threat to diversity. And the more importantly, this diversity is largely a kind of an endemic species. So if we lose from Sri Lanka, and it's going to be lose from entire globe actually, which probably helpful, may be helpful in the future for solving some of the issues. And in addition, actually, we have research in the direction of the gap dynamics and how the rainforest help to recover during this the canopy opening process, which is the way that actually the dynamism and the resiliency build up within the natural forest. And these are some of the pictures of Singaraja. And also we have plantation forestry in the country, but I would say that plantation forestry is a very minute fraction, and we don't have much land to do this plantation, so which is quite limited actually. Then so we have the species like pinus in plantation in the upcountry and the mid-country areas of the of Sri Lanka, and then we have some teak plantation and teak in the dry zone area, and eucalypts in the again high elevational area. In addition, we have kaya as well as the mahogany plantation in the country. Then out of these plantations, we have some environmental issues close to the natural forest plantations, which is finest actually. Now we have research going on direct in the direction of some rehabilitating of this pinus plantation through supporting the natural regeneration process of the environment with the different plots actually completely removing of the pinus and then re-establishment with the native species, as well as thinning out of the pinus to bring this natural vegetation into the different level. Now, given that context, I want you to understand the situation of Sri Lanka with respect to environment. Now, this is the wetter part of the country, wet zone, which receives sometimes more than 5,000 millimeter rainfall, right? And that is a very critical aspect for the country. And wet zone area is the higher area we received highest amount of rainfall in the country. And then we have substantial area of the dry zone. And if you remember, actually, this dry zone is dominated by some of the reserved forest in the country, and wet zone area, very much scattered forest is available. Now, given that condition, it is something that we need to understand with respect to our forestry and educating the people, because this is the map of elevation of the country, and you can see that this dry zone area is flat and close to the sea level. And when you go to this area, this is actually something quite high elevational, up to sometimes the 900,000 meters above the mean sea level. And more importantly, the most of the streamlines, and we have about 101, though that country is small, we have about 101 different rivers originated from these central highlands. And if you remember that central highland is the place where we are having limited amount of natural vegetation, but yet the central highlands, the tree cover is quite high. So therefore, we need to wisely use the land use in order to protect the environment. And this is our land use pattern actually. In the country, we have the natural vegetation close forest. Actually, it is about roughly, if you take about forest plantation, it's come to 31%. But out of the rest, more than 50% is subjected to some sort of agriculture. So therefore, it is very important for us to think about that landscape is a mosaic within forest as well as the rest of the different kind of agricultural setup in the country. So therefore, if we want to make sure that the everything is conserved, supported, and used for betterment of the environment as well as the livelihood of the people and also the economy of the country, we must be thinking about, I think, with respect to how we're going to use this landscape for different purposes. I think that is one of the biggest challenge actually. In addition, that we have some kind of impact on climate change, and our wet part is getting more wetter, and drier part getting more drier based on the new analysis. And as a result, the temperature also slightly increasing, and drought and floods also coming at different levels, and very high intensity rains and rainfall amount has not changed, but the intensity of rain has quite significant now, and we have some kind of a lightning as well. And as a result of that, we getting some kind of a flooding in low environment, and we have settlement. You can see that it is kind of a disturbing situations within the country with respect to climate change. The more than that, actually, what I have shown already is that the nice part of the environment, but we have agriculture, and agriculture is supporting actually more than 50% of the rural population. And also some of the hills are subjected to intensive cultivation of the vegetables as well as some other crops to support actually the. And if as a result of that, we have a lot of issues of soil erosion, and you can see that this is one of these are two important tanks of Sri Lankan context. So those generating electricity as well as the supporting irrigations in the drier part of the country, and these are the central hills. And you can see that the water here is very much blue in color, but water here is very much now you wonder why it is that. And that is because actually this sort of cultivation in different environment, and you have cleared all this, and some kind of a protection is there. But some of the instance, if you have more than 5,000 millimeter rainfall, you can imagine actually. In addition, that there are certain species, so those species having issues with respect to utilization part. And I'm taking only few species, and these species are, this is the Diprocarpus glandulosus, and which is one of the tropical rainforest species. And in order to get the resin out of this, you have to dig a hole there, and then you have to put a fire. And then once you do this action, so you get collected this resin. This resin is quite very much expensive and used for actually various protection of some of the temple paintings, etc. And the second example is Salacia reticulata, which is used for controlling the diabetics. And this is the liana, and this people actually cutting it and then selling in the. And very recent study found that this is ebony family. One of the species belongs to ebony family, and this is used for wrapping of one of the cigar, and that create actually a big problem for this particular species, and almost extinct. And now the population is limited to a kind of a small stunted population, because all the big trees have already exploited. So from one side we have agriculture, from the other side we are losing actually in this species, and also deforestation up to some level. And there is another issue of the environment, and as I earlier mentioned, now this is the dam. It shows that water here is green, but here is, and this water coming from a river, and which is coming from the central highlands. That the yellow color is largely due to the soil erosion from this agricultural field. So we have forest, and we have other land uses, but we have some issues actually with respect to uh, entire environment. And given that condition, I would like to talk about very little very small things about. And this is my university, and from our university we trying to facilitate so these aspect in our not only in our agriculture curricula, but also in our forestry curricula. And what we trying to do is that we have forest department, so it has started in 1950s, and they have their certificate on diploma level, and largely contributing to management of the plantation forest, as well as management of some of the forest area. And unfortunately, we don't have actually the natural forest management scenario, but it is becoming an important as the natural forests are surrounded by large number of communities, so that protection doesn't support actually if there is no such involvement in the local community, because forest department alone cannot safeguard the entire forest community of the country. So that forest department is having our educational supportive system, and then we have a degree level also, and we have several universities in the country, and we are offering the some places we have a BSc degree in forestry and environmental management, very few, but most of the places forestry is embedded into other degree programs, especially agriculture and environmental sciences. And more importantly, now we have actually postgraduate level education, and in that places we have agroforestry and environmental forestry and natural forest management, and then environmental science and biodiversity conservation and ecotourism management and wildlife conservation and management. And then we have MPhil and PhD training, and usually in our university we are taking about 10 students per year for this kind of a training process. So these are the formal level of training actually at the, and this formal level training has been defined based on either agriculture as separate or some instances forestry as separate, and then addressing the issue of and in up to some level the environmental science issue came into action, and then trying to solve the scenario of this natural science versus this social science issue. Because if you look about that, the real issue of the conservation issue is not necessarily the forest, but the people outside the forest and people outside the natural vegetations, and that is actually the human nature. And as a result, I will show one example where I understand what is mean by a conservation. And I have shown this slide previously, and this is the guy actually who is doing this the extraction of this the oil from the Diprocarps glandulosus. And we want to go inside the natural forest, and one of the virgin natural forests in the country, which is called Kanneliya, and also in the Singharaja. And we don't know actually the pathway to go through with this go through pathway to go through into this forest. And then we after informing to the forest department, we got these two people's support. This there is another person, and these two people's support, and we know that actually they have been blacklisted, right? Blacklisted because of their exploiters of forest. And the real problem is that once you have this kind of exploitation, and when there is a kind of a wind, these plants could tend to actually broken, and as a result, genetic resources and trees going to be quite limited. Now, this kind of people also we need to take into consideration, and we went with these two people. And then what this person trying to do is that he said he want to use this plant, so which is a kind of a liana, and which is heavily used for wrapping of some of the material. And he said that I want to cut this, and we said that okay, you cut it, and we will not tell that to the forest department. And then we thought that actually that guy is cutting this plant from some height so that the plant will regenerate. But he didn't do that. And what he did, he trying to pull out this entire plant. And then he said, no, I can't cut this plant because it is not coming out. And if I cut this, I can use only this limited extent of this plant. And then we asked actually what you want to do. He said, no, this is not the plant for me. And actually that tells us, so we need to learn from actually anybody. We need to learn from sometimes even blacklisters. We cannot exclude the people from the issue of the conservation. And thereafter, we trying to solve this issue of this exploitation with the forest department as well as these people, and then try to identify the mechanism actually that they can help each other. And after that, actually, it brought a quite good support for forest conservation from these blacklisted people. I think that is something that actually we need to bring into our curricula about the communication and all others. So therefore, what we understood from our forestry education in the country, in the context of this agriculture, forestry, and land use, and then all other categories, the conflict situation. So we have a less demand for this forestry education, but there is a high demand for natural resource management kind of degrees. But yet, actually, we are having some kind of mixing of this forestry and its uses in different scenarios, and that has to embedded into the current scenario and current situation. So, at the end, actually, what I want to suggest, Sri Lanka is a country that is probably a field laboratory for forestry, because we have at least 27% of different kind of forest, so which are highly diverse. And we have this agroforest embedded with this forest cover, and then that probably helpful for Sri Lanka to survive out of this lot of issues, so that environmental conservation. And therefore, we have a lot of issues related to how to balance and how to manage these natural resources. And then it is probably a paradise for research on forestry, agroforestry, and then natural resource management, especially through higher education process. And we have actually linked with Michigan State, and we have linked with several universities of US as well as Europe and Australia. And we do support their study abroad program, especially to show that this land use conflict. And that probably bring a kind of a uh, personnel, and which help to understand that we need to safeguard and support forest, as well as need to think about all other land use categories and how we going to use all these land use categories with respect to utilization of these species. So with that, I would like to conclude actually my discussion, and thank you very much for your attention. If there are any issues, and I hope that I can use only the given time, which is almost about 45 minutes. And I'm very happy to answer any questions if you have any kind of issues with respect to my presentation or any other aspect with respect to forestry and forestry education in the country. So that's the end of my discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Quite a fascinating presentation from very specific genetics and reproductive biology to systems thinking, landscape, livelihoods, agroforestry systems, and the challenge, of course, of land use. Um, it's amazing. I will try to start with one simple question. Um, uh, Given the variety of issues, particularly on the natural forest and the tree cover canopy that you mentioned, is that you see that as an opportunity of building or having biodiversity corridors, or that's something that it's is too small or not practical?
Thank you. I think I will go to that slide. Actually, you can see that, yes, indeed, biodiversity corridors are one of the important aspect actually for linking, because in the past, all these natural forests are united together, so that we have actually a couple of projects on the GCF, the Global Climate Fund projects, and which are looking about how to link these. But when we are linking this, it is through agricultural land setup, and then the linking cannot actually totally convert into a kind of a full natural scale natural forest, but it is not the completely artificial environment of the high level of agriculture, but it is through different setup of agroforestry system. For example, here you have home garden system, as well as other agroforestry system dominated by tea and especially tea and rubber. But in Sri Lankan context, one of the issue arises. I think that also need to solve as early as possible, because we have conflict with the wild animal with respect to agricultural as well as the with the livelihood, especially in the case of elephant. We have human elephant conflict, and then we have some issues like the monkeys, as well as some wild animal like wild boar. That is because actually the nature of the land use pattern of the country. So you can see that most of the forest now already have been used for agriculture, and when we are intensifying agriculture and when we have deforestation, so that wild animal is having some kind of a issue and their population has increased. So that solution is that the ecological solution, but unfortunately we don't have actually data for, except for the elephant, we don't have data for all other animal categories. So how the population increase, so which is a kind of a concern at that situation. Yes, corridors are one of the options actually we can use in this scenario.
Thank you very much, Professor. The floor is open. Dr. John Enos has raised his hand.
Yes. Thank you for a fascinating presentation about Sri Lanka. I've only been in the country on one occasion. That was in January 2005. And that was just after you had a fairly major natural disaster. And there was a lot of talk then about whether mangrove forests had actually helped reduce the impact of the tsunami that hit in 2004. Has there been any developments in that area? Do you know, have there been decisions whether or not the mangroves were important, and have there been attempts to increase the mangrove forest cover as a result?
Thank you very much. Yes, I think we had a tsunami, and tsunami actually impacted heavily in this part of the country. And yes, of course, mangrove is one of the important component of our system. And you can see that our mangrove vegetation cover is only about 0.2%, and which is only 15,670. Very limited, because because of the utilization of the beaches and all others, and also sometimes the prawn farming created a kind of a problem for mangrove vegetation. And not only mangrove, actually, in we have the coastal environment, the coconut dominated coastal agroforestry system. In both scenarios, the damage out of the tsunami is quite, we can't say that the zero, but damage controlled whenever we had mangroves, and whenever we had actually this coconut dominated home garden, as well as the landscape in the beach side. Not only these two, and we have some kind of a natural situation like sand dunes. The importance of all these is highlighted very much during this tsunami period, and there were a lot of concern. I think now we have actually in the forest department with respect to mangrove restoration project. So we assess the entire mangrove vegetation using the GIS techniques, and that vegetation whenever possible trying to expand. But one of the issue is that we have about 15 to 20 different mangrove species. But when it's come to the propagation of mangrove species, only a couple of species are easily propagated. So therefore, the mangrove revegetation process is only with limited number of species. I think that is something that we need to taken into consideration, because one example is that we have Limnotsaria, which is actually we call Ratamilla, is which is one of the mangrove species, limited only to 2 or 3 locations, which is a kind of a the endangered, because it has been utilized heavily. Now, propagation of that is quite difficult. But yes, we have actually mangrove revegetation process, which probably highlighted very recently in the global publication also, which is conducted by the Forest Department of Sri Lanka. It is there actually, and in addition, they support actually development of the coastal agroforestry dominated by coconut system, and also some of the useful trees. Those two aspects have been taken into consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pushkam Pakumara. There was another hand raised.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the
I
one
think it's
question.
no longer raised.
Hello?
Oh,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can hear you.
go ahead.
Yeah, I had the one question about the home garden system. So, in what kind of situation they promote the home garden system in Sri Lanka? Why is that so popular?
Okay, I think the situation is that it is coming from for a long period of time. So you know that I am living in this Kandy region, so which is the central highland, and in Kandy region we have a kind of a global land use system which we trying to identify as a kind of a the global heritage in the future. So that is called Candian Home Garden. So which originated to support actually the people's requirement. Why it has happened? Because all these area have been used to cultivate first tea, and then tea failed, and then tea has been abandoned. Sorry, first actually coffee, and coffee failed because of the coffee rust, right? And then the coffee was replaced by tea, and then when the coffee was replaced by tea after utilization for a long period, and then some lands have already been abandoned, and those are subjected to fire during the dry season. But whenever the land is owned by people, and then people trying to put actually whatever they want, and which is supported by the national program, and that is how actually this home garden came into the context. It is not the best. It is not the best compared to the natural forest. But when we consider about the landscape as well as the land use pattern, we cannot actually increase the forest cover because land is something limited in the country. So therefore, to handle actually the issue of the conservation and the utilization part, this home garden has been evolved as one of the important land use category. Now, individual own probably 0.3, 0.2, 0.1 in large level home garden, 2 hectares or something like that. But if you collectively take all the home gardens in the country, it is 15%, roughly about 15% of the area of the country. I think that is why it is important. That does not necessarily means that we can be very much happy within this environment. Still, there are a lot of white area, and that area need to be actually supported with the right trees in right places, so that we are doing some work with the government as well as with the forest department and all other stakeholder categories to facilitate and promote actually suitable species. That is how this home garden issue came into the some kind of a global landscape, not only us actually in Southeast Asia and then India, and also in some other countries, especially the Nepal and Bhutan also, and Bangladesh. So we are having this home garden situation actually came into a kind of a special land use category, which probably controlled by both forest as well as the agriculture officials.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you,
I got another
Yeah.
question about you have the certificate program, you have a diploma program, you also have the bachelor, master, and PhD. So for the certificate program and for the diploma program, what kind of target like audience and how to deliver that kind of the certificate or diploma program?
Yes, I think that the certificate program is basically offered by the forest department, because in we have the forest department which is the custodian of the forest cover of the country, and forest department having forest officers, and forest officers are trained in forestry college, which is located in the upcountry area. And this training programs basically trying to address so how and which way that actually the timber supply, and because the country need timber, and we cannot import actually a lot of timber from other countries. We don't have much foreign exchange reserve, but the timber coming largely from the agroforest and the home garden, and the natural forests are not utilizing for timber extraction. So that is a policy decision. So if the originally this the certificate and diploma courses developed for training of the forest department people to facilitate the plantation forestry, especially eucalypts, pinus, and teak and mahogany, and then the timber corporation people for extraction of the timber. But now it is very difficult actually. So therefore, that training turning into kind of a multiple uses of natural forest, which is included ecotourism and all other aspects, plus some level of plantation management and some level of the natural forest management. So that is how actually this training program, the certificate and diploma program are conducted. But that is limited only to the forestry department people of the country.
So is it mainly online or is the in person?
Oh no, it is not online. It is on ground
Sorry,
actually.
can-
It is on ground.
Oh, okay, it's like a continue like career. Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much. We have two other hands raised, and we are reaching the time limit. So please, if we can have the two questions, and hopefully short answers, so we can attend
Oh,
all the possibilities. Thank you, Susie.
okay, thank you. Thank you giving me the opportunity. Yeah, thank you very much for this very comprehensive and interesting presentation. So I want to ask about the career path of the students who graduate from the undergraduate and also graduate programs in the universities. Can most of them go to the forestry sectors of the government after their graduation, or they have other a career path, and can they get decent job after graduation?
Well, I think that's a good question actually. The forestry training people largely going to forest department, and then we have plantation sector. In plantation sector, plantation forestry becoming a little important, especially with the degraded tea land. So they are going for tea plantation, and also there are a lot of environmental and agroforestry development. So that that area also there are some job opportunities, but limited actually there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We have Suranjit Arijasena.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, of course.
Yes, Professor. Professor, I'm also from Sri Lankan student from the currently studying in China. So thank you very much for your very interesting presentation and for the introduction of Sri Lankan forestry. So I have a very short question. My first question is in the forest policy in Sri Lanka. So actually in current forest policy in Sri Lanka is enough to conserve the forestry in Sri Lanka. So any areas need to be improved in the forest policies in Sri Lanka. And my second question is, what areas mainly involved for the ecotourism and community-based forest management in Sri Lanka, the recently identified the areas? These are my two questions.
Okay, thank you, Suranjit. Yes, forestry policy have been recent. I think we have 1995 forest policy, which identify actually 5 areas. So including the agroforestry and the natural forest, and natural forest in Sri Lankan context is not managed, but which is probably need to consider actually And then very recently, the forest policy has been revised to include actually this social aspect as well as the community aspect. But community forestry, so that I would say that actually forest policy has been revised actually, including many people together. So we also involved with that, identified the necessary component. I'm not saying that 100% adequate, but for the moment it is supporting forest conservation. And with respect to community forestry, except for limited environment like sanctuaries, in our case, actually, forest, the people are not living inside the forest, except sanctuaries as well as in some of the local and indigenous communities in some dry zone areas. So community forestry having some kind of issues in the past, but that is because of actually poor participation and poor participatory approach. So the government and the forest policy aspect taken those aspects into consideration when defining the new forest policy.
Okay.
Thank you very much,
Okay.
Professor. We have one last question. We are running over time, and this is from Mayo Biao Lee.
Yes, I'm Li Maobiao from Southwest Forestry University in China, Yunnan Province. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed, we
Yes.
can hear very well.
Okay, actually I have 3 questions, but to cut it short, I will just ask only 1 question.
Okay.
So I checked some quick data that the area of Yunnan Province is 394,000 square kilometers compared to 65,000 square kilometers in Sri Lanka. Well, the population were Asian elephants. That's maximum elephants. And Yunnan province is only about like 300 hertz. Well, this figure in Sri Lanka is over 4,000 hertz. So my question is, and also in Yunnan province, these elephants are largely roaming or migrating in the southern prefectures of Yunnan province. So we have some kind of hectic problems, so human elephant conflict with elephant in the southern regions of the province, like even in the periphery areas of the nature reserves, like in Xishuangbanna. So I would like to know, in Sri Lanka, do you have any specific programs that you can kind of mitigate or curb this kind of human-elephant conflicts? Like maybe you have some kind of fencing program or any kind of corridor program, so that maybe we can try to practice them or localize them in our province.
Okay, thank you. I think yes, we have the fencing program. I think earlier the earlier idea was that actually fencing the natural vegetations, and then we have the corridor programs for. And but what happened actually historically, sometimes our colonization programs within the elephant corridors, so that every time we have a conflict, and those examples are there. So in order to avoid such, the fencing program, and then sometime digging of this the drains, some kind of a channel, and that program also there. Somehow in some area this conflict is quite serious actually, and that is largely because of the poor land use and the settlement process. And but now we cannot actually taken these people out, and though that it is the ideal, and some instances they trying to restrict that area now. Earlier that they have the protection of natural environment, now they're trying to protect actually the human environment also. So basically the fencing as well as drenching, and also some of the population captive in some area, like we have elephant orphanage for certain categories. Those trying to reduce actually, but we have not completely eradicate the issue, or we have not totally addressed actually the issue of human elephant conflict. It is still there in some area. So probably I can actually link you to the some of the information what we are having, and some of the people who doing elephant research, and probably that might helpful for you to we all to share our experience, and that may be useful for us to developing strategies. So I will link actually our people to you in due course.
Thank you very much. Because I'm doing policy studies, so this is closely related to the policies we're trying to develop. And also maybe you have any ideas that you may develop some slaughtering program like people do in African countries, like in Kruger National Park.
Oh yes, we have actually one program. We have a big program which is supported by the World Bank. So which is the rehabilitation of the national park, because our national parks, the especially in the dry area, is subjected to some kind of a very dry situation, and then during that period, the elephants or any animal, they don't have enough fodder actually. So in order, and also they are threatened by the invasive species such as lantana as well as the eupatorium. And then there was a program actually to remove lantana and eupatorium from the forest, and we also partly involved to assess the ecology. And when we removing lantana, the grasses are coming up, and then fodder availability is quite high. But issue is that lantana cannot be completely eradicated because we're going against the succession, and unless human is there, lantana is coming back again. So that program, except for the places where the community involved, other places program was failed because all the places, once we remove the lantana, we need to continuously remove the lantana because they are coming from seed banks as well as the dispersal from the birds and others. So we have failing example actually, except the community involved in utilization of lantana for various purposes, making the boxes and things like that.
Yes, thank you very much. We also have very bad eupatorium problem. We also have problems.
I will link actually our scientists to you actually, right?
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pushpakara. It's been fascinating and a pleasure. Thank you very much for UBC, especially Susie Singh, for hosting this webinar. And we've run 8 minutes over time, but I think it was quite interesting and quite fascinating for all of us. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Susie, and thank you, Carlos, for hosting me. And it was so nice to talk to you. Thank you.